As the war in Ukraine nears its fifth year, fighting is intensifying on multiple fronts. Ukrainian and Russian forces continue to trade blows. Amid all this, Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine will not cede a single inch of territory to Russia. In Zaporizhia, Ukrainian forces are pushing back as Russian troops maintain pressure near key positions. Fighting also rages around Pokrovsk and eastern Donetsk, one of Ukraine's last defensive strongholds in the region. Ukraine's army chief says Moscow is pouring in reserves in a bid to break through. Away from the front lines, Ukraine is battling a deadly winter. Russian drones and missiles have battered energy infrastructure. Hundreds of thousands are without heating, water, and power as temperatures plunge below freezing. President Volodymyr Zelensky says this has been the hardest winter since the war began. While on Russian side, Ukraine says drones struck an oil refinery in the town of Russia's Kransoor Krai, triggering a large fire. Speaking in Lithuania, Zelensky drew a clear red line. He said Ukraine will not cede a single inch of territory to Russia. The point of contrition is land, particularly Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. These are the territories which Moscow claims but has not fully captured.
For us, security guarantees come first. These are bilateral security guarantees from the United States. The document is 100% ready, and we are waiting for our partners to confirm the date and place when we will sign it. After that, the document will go through ratification in the US Congress and the Ukrainian Parliament in line with our agreements.
Russia's stance remains rigid. President Vladimir Putin says that Russia will not compromise on what he calls historic lands. The Kremlin is demanding Ukrainian withdrawal from 4 annexed regions, even areas still under Kyiv's control. Putin has warned Russia will take territory by force if diplomacy fails. The deadlock played out at a recent talk in Abu Dhabi involving Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. Germany has since accused Moscow of stubborn insistence on territorial demands. It warns that talks could drag on. Washington is trying to bridge the gap. Zelensky says the U.S. security guarantee document is 100% ready and awaiting signature. The United States has signaled it is ready to provide long-term security backing to Ukraine. And under President Donald Trump's second term, Zelensky and Trump have met at least 5 times. From the White House to Davos and Abu Dhabi, focusing on security guarantees, ceasefire options, and post-war recovery. While Trump says the deal is getting closer, Europe, however, remains cautious. As bombs fall and talks continue, Ukraine demands security without losing land, but Russia demands territories without concessions. Until that gap is bridged, peace remains elusive and the war goes on. Joining us live from Oslo is Dr. Glenn Diesen, Professor of International Relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. Dr. Diesen, thank you so much for joining us back on WION. Where do you think these talks are headed at this point?
Well, it looks like the talks might be unraveling. Again, it's unclear if the comments by Zelensky is just posturing, or if this is a new position, because if it is, then of course the talks have failed. So this stance that they won't accept any concessions on any territory, it's morally understandable, but politically it's quite suicidal, because it doesn't actually reflect reality on the ground. That is, the Ukraine is becoming militarily defeated with a manpower issue. Its economy is collapsing. The infrastructure is quite shattered, with now, of course, the electricity going out. The Western support is waning. And there's a demographic collapse with millions in hiding, and any men who can flee the country, they're trying to do so. So it's quite a desperate situation. So to take this absolute stance now, as you said, well, how does that make sense? What does it mean for the talks? It could be just some grandstanding to attempt to get some concession before you get over the line. But I suspect that this is it's more than this. This is signaling that the talks are now definitely failing.
Dr. Deason, can Europe really help Ukraine? Can the West, even the United States, help Ukraine in this land fight with Russia? Or will ultimately Ukraine have to surrender? We just heard from Germany that said Moscow has a stubborn insistence. So statements like these do come out. It appears the U.S. wants to help Ukraine, but nonetheless, as you mentioned, the realities on the ground apparently tell a different story. What can Ukraine do?
Well, the problem of this went back to 2014 because within NATO it was well understood that Russia considers NATO's incursion into Ukraine to be an existential threat. So given that there was no diplomacy for almost 4 years and the West said they would resolve this on the battlefield, the Russians reached a conclusion that there wouldn't be any political settlement, and if there would be a political settlement, it probably wouldn't be trusted. So what was essentially a conflict over an expansionist NATO and the need to restore Ukraine's neutrality has now manifested itself as a territorial dispute. And given that Russia doesn't trust NATO or the future Ukrainian government to uphold any agreement, I think that they see the territorial concessions being a main guarantee that Ukraine can't be used as a front line against Russia in the future. So I think a lot of the instincts now in Europe goes against what it should do. If you want to help Ukraine, stop threatening to send European troops into Ukraine. Stop talking about building an 800,000 strong army in Ukraine to counter Russia. If you really want to save Ukraine, remove it from the front lines of this new geopolitical struggle between NATO and Russia, in which Ukraine is being used as a pawn. So I think this is the main thing if one really wanted to help Ukraine. Don't put it on the front lines of this security competition. So I think that the more the Russians could be convinced that Ukraine will be neutral and not a future front line against Russia, the more likely would get some concessions on the Russian side.
Completely makes sense. Dr. Glenn Deason, thank you for joining us on WION. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.